So we're back with Joe from, it's been all of 5 seconds. It wasn't even that. We're talking today about the actual assembly line, what he learned from looking at the Cybertruck line itself. I'm Brian. Welcome to My Tesla Weekend. And Joe, welcome, of course. You got to walk the line. You got to see the event. You got to walk the line. You got to take pictures and ask questions. You saw some things that are pretty unique in auto manufacturing. Tell us about the process. Tell us about what you got.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Tesla for providing an amazing amount of access and the ability to take the video and the images, talk with the employees, and just see a large part of the production process of Cybertruck was just amazing. And everything that I saw and everybody else that was at the event and through the videos couldn't have been possible without the support of Tesla. So thank you very much. Yes, I was able to walk probably 65% of the overall production of the Cybertruck, and also with some of my previous drone video, I'm able to fill in some of the gaps with some views that I have from outside. So if you were to watch my video, you'll be able to see all that. But we predominantly spent the time on the ground floor through the middle section, if you will, of Giga, Texas. The line itself runs from the north to the south. I viewed it from the south to the north, so if you watch my video, you'll see things getting less and less assembled as the time goes on. But generally speaking, it starts with the castings that are done in the casting machine area in the northeast corner, and a stamped inner shell where the passengers would be. That is done through stamping and through the body in white. And then the part of the line that I saw is where you take those three huge pieces and you basically bolt them together. The front rear castings are bolted to that inner steel structure.
And at that point, there's no battery.
There's nothing.
It's the occupant home, front and rear casting.
Right. It's almost like, I don't know, like Legos or so. You stick the front and rear together to the middle part. It's just a shell. But the unique thing is it doesn't take a lot of robots to do that, to weld and put together the whole thing. It's just that center structure that is. The rest of it just puts on. And then that shell very quickly starts getting some stuff put onto it that, to me, being at other factories, other automotive factories, it's pretty cool to see. For example, the front windshield, the glass roof, and the glass rear window is bonded onto the structure immediately after those three sections are put together. And, that's usually in most automotive manufacturing, the glass is put on last.
Yeah. And so that's just like the outside construction. They're putting the glass up first. So at this point, you've got the front and rear casting, the occupant home, and then they put the shell on, windows in.
Right. The windshield, the top, and the rear.
Yes. Because the side windows are going to be in the doors.
Right. Well, and then there's a triangular piece, and that's put on a little later. I even actually show you the robot putting the butyl rubber adhesive on it. But yeah, so you have a basic shell with glass already installed and nothing else, which is kind of unique.
So then the next step is?
The next step after that is they essentially install the dashboard and the rear seats. They kind of hang them on the rear inner wall. The rear seats don't attach to the floor. They attach to the rear wall, and then the seat cushions kind of fold up and down.
Right.
But they can do that because the next step after that is they take the structural pack that already has the front seats, the center console, the carpet, the insulation panels, a lot of the wire. It's all as a sub-assembly that's lifted directly into the car. So by the time they put the battery in, the interior is almost completed.
So it sounds like when this car is built, the number of people who have to climb inside the structure is approaching zero?
I would say close to, if not zero. That was one of the overall things that I noticed is the amount of automation, the amount of robots, the lack of stations, the lack of areas for people to be in was kind of I expected it, but it was surprising to see nonetheless. If you go to a normal automotive manufacturing, you'll see robots, but you also see a lot of people running around and, putting pieces in, maybe running wire, all that. In the Cybertruck's case, it was almost all automated from what I could see.
Okay, at that point, it's basically done. Now, one of the big advantages you were telling me about earlier is when you paint a car. There's a couple steps that make it a hassle that are missing. Would you explain that?
Well, one of the with a traditional way of making a vehicle that I've seen is that they go through the body in white, they weld all the parts together. The rear quarter panel is usually the structural part of the car, or at least it's welded onto the car. They'll put the doors on, they'll get everything but the interior glass and all that, just the sheet metal all put together, ready for painting. And then it will go through the paint system, and that requires it usually to be dipped into something called e-coating, which is sort of like a undercoating, but it actually protects the metal and prevents corrosion, and it makes for that base that they then put the undercoating or the primer, and then they put the base and then the clear, and then usually at that point the doors are taken back off, and then they are put to a different part of the factory where they put the interior panels on, the wiring, the glass, and all that kind of stuff. And then later on, those have to be married back to the same car, because you have to make sure that the paint is exactly the same, it matches, it was all painted at the same time, and it's possible that you get variations in paint colors, so they want to make sure they avoid that. So it adds another level of logistics that they have to do to make sure that those parts eventually come back to the same car. Whereas in the Cybertruck, upstairs is where they make the doors, they make the tailgate, they make the front, the hood. All that's done with basically stainless steel that's cut and shaped to where it needs to be. And then they bond a stamped inner section to it using an adhesive. And then that inner section has all of the mounting points, the bolts, if you will. And then when the Cybertruck gets to the appropriate point, any one of those, as long as they have the right color interior, can be used. So it saves them from having to do that whole painting process. It saves them from having to track each of the doors.
Each door.
Exactly.
Yeah. So normally with a paint shop, I asked Sandy Monroe how much a paint shop costs, and he said 200, 500, a billion if you like. Yeah. There's no limit to how much you can spend on a paint shop, but hundreds of millions. And then the next problem is you have to let them cure for a day. So you need storage somewhere in the rafters for all those bodies and doors. And then the cost, the time, and time is money. If you can get your car back out the door a day faster by not painting it, then that's a big savings. Yeah. You saw a huge amount of space. But in terms of total footprint inside the building, how much of the building is taken up by that one line?
5%. I mean, it's very small. You know, one of the things I talk about in my video is the grid lines. It's basically how Giga Texas was built and organized, and each of the columns is a grid point, and they're about 50 feet approximately. And the width of the lines that I saw that we went through, at least the open to the public and what I was able to video, was only about 2 columns wide, so about 100 feet wide. And you think that the width of Giga Texas is about 1,200 feet, so that gives you a pretty good idea of how small of a section they're using. Of course, they do vertical manufacturing, so above that on the second, mostly the third floors, where they also have robots, they do the doors and all that. And then they have a lot of elevator systems that move up and down and then across, the line. And the Cybertrucks just follow along using the elevators, the parts arrive and put together.
So when you're looking at these videos, the important thing to remember is, as huge as this space looks, you are looking at a tiny, tiny fraction of the factory. When I had a chance to see inside final assembly at Shareholder Day, not only was the space so huge that people assumed it went all the way to the far wall, and it wasn't, it was only to the center section where the plastics are, but not only was it less than half the width of the building, it was only the first floor.
Right.
And there's the scale is impossible to understand.
There's 3 basic structured floors, but then there's a whole bunch of mezzanines that had built inside. So there's multiple levels that do different things within the factory.
So yeah, it's a very big place. Did you have a chance to talk with any of the employees there?
It's one of the things that they really did well, is they had a lot of employees there to ask all kinds of questions. And one of the just my impressions was they were so enthusiastic. They were so excited about people being able to see what they've been doing. A lot of the people that have been working on the Cybertruck have been wanting people to be able to see what they've done, not just what the Cybertruck itself looks like and what it does, but just they put in a ton of work to make this thing happen, and just the opportunity to be able to explain it was really great.
I have found Tesla employees to be incredibly enthusiastic in ways that I have not seen at other companies. And were there any surprises on the Cybertruck for you? Something you looked at and said, oh, that's unusual. I didn't expect that.
We've covered a lot of it as far as the automation, the size, how they use the verticality.
But the truck itself.
Well, there's a bunch of things. One of the things that I think was interesting, looking at how that inner shell and the stainless steel are bonded together and then mounted to the vehicle. When it got to the appropriate point, the vehicle had most of the interior done. It already had the hood put on, and now they're putting the front and rear fenders on. And what's unique about that is with most normal cars, the rear quarter panel is already on the car. It's welded onto it. In this case, because they didn't have the bed liner in yet, they just had basically the casting and the kind of like casted, I call them sails that join the top of the rear casting and the shell of the vehicle. It makes it kind of a structural triangle. So as the suspension is loaded up and the casting would want to bend upwards, that sail panel transfers a load into that overall cabin. So all of that is still open and visible. So the robots will take that bonded stainless steel and the regular steel inner shell with all the mounting points. It would pick it up, put it onto that casting, and then another robot would come along on the sides and do the bolting, and another one would reach in from the other side and then bolt it to it. So basically the front and the rear fenders are, as a unit, bolted right onto the castings directly.
Wow.
And then of course the bed liner is a plastic kind of a bed liner, and it just sits right in the in the bed onto the castings, and it finishes it off just like that.
I asked an engineer at Ford how you merge things like different metals, aluminum to stainless to steel, whatever, and he said just that, adhesives.
Right.
You put, as long as it's not physically in contact to electrolyze,
right,
the corrosion, are adhesives strong enough? And he found that very amusing.
Yes.
Because flex tape is a good example of how strong you can make something. Yeah. Adhesives many of them are absolutely permanent.
Right. That's actually a very good point. By the way that they do that, the stainless steel and the particular mixture that they did is pretty corrosion resistant anyway. But by doing it bonded this way, galvanic corrosion is pretty much eliminated. I just think it's pretty unique how they did that. The other thing that came to my mind when I was looking at how that was done is, if the Cybertruck were to be in an accident and you're thinking about repairing it, with a regular car, you'd take it to a body shop, they would pound out the dents, they'd use Bondo, they'd do all that stuff, repair it, paint. For the Cybertruck, it occurred to me that just replacing the panel is probably the way to go. Just take the old one off, bolt the new one on, and you're done. And the amount of savings for a body shop, to me, seems like it would be pretty good.
Pretty significant. So guys, what did we miss? What did we misunderstand? Thanks so much to Joe for coming out and buying me breakfast. That was unexpected. Very cool. But he explained that I am a guest here in Texas. I'm in a Cracker Barrel. So yeah, leave it in the comments. We got to know what we missed. What was your favorite part of the Cybertruck, of the event, of all of it? And like, subscribe, do the usual things. Head over to Joe's channel. Maybe support him too, because he's out here working. You don't understand. He drives hours to get here. He drives hours. Spends hours at the site. He spends hours editing. He lives in San Antonio. He has to commute. So show him some love. So yeah, leave it in the comments and stay tuned, stay juicy, and I can't wait to hear from you. Clever robots, perhaps, in Texas too.